Hello, and welcome to this introduction to editing audio in Adobe Audition. In this, we're going to focus on editing podcasts, although this skill will apply to editing audio for video or audio for music or whatever you choose to do for your personal projects. So, without further ado, let's dive right into this. To make sure that we're on the same page, I want you to have the same window that I'm looking at. First thing I'm going to have you do is go under Window, Workspace, and choose the default setting. Next, I want to make sure your audio is set up properly. So if you're recording into your session using a microphone, go to Adobe Audition, Preferences, and go to Audio Hardware. So the main thing you want to focus on is the default input and output. I'm using the external preamps for my microphone. It's called a Focusrite Scarlett Solo. So that's going to be my default setting. And the output's going to be a built-in one. So I'm going to have mine set to this and say OK. And I'm happy with those settings. So make sure that your setup is how you're using. If you're using a built-in microphone, make sure that's set up properly. Press OK. Now that we have our setup ready to go, I want to record some audio so we have something to look at. So let's just record some random stuff. When I hit the record button, it's going to prompt me to label it, which is very important to keep track of all your audio. Make sure everything's organized. So I'll just call this a demo recording 1. I'm going to leave the sample rate at 44.1, although if you have the option to record at a higher rate, I would recommend you do that, as the final product tends to be something smaller like an MP3. It's a lossy format, meaning information is being lost. So a WAV file is all the information, and MP3 is a crunched down version of that. So picture going from a very high quality image to something more pixelated. You lose some of that information. So you want to start off with the highest quality you can. So I'll just leave mine for this example at 44.1. Since it's just my voice, I'll leave it as mono. When I'm all happy with that, I'll press OK. Hello, welcome to this introduction to editing audio in Adobe Audition. If this was a podcast and I wanted to remove sounds, this is how I would do it. So now that I have my recording, you can see it's in this little window here. You can see this waveform. So this essentially shows you the amplitude of your audio. It gives you a layout. On the right side, it'll show you in decibel levels how quiet or loud your recording was. Also, when I press play, hello, welcome to this introduction. There's a meter to editing audio, and this meter will show you what your peak amplitude is. When recording, you want to make sure you have your setup properly. So if you're using an external device and it has something either called a gain knob or a trim knob, you want to make sure you're giving yourself some headroom. So either 6 decibels below, like -6 or -3, is ideal when you're recording. So keep that in mind when you're recording. So if I play this, notice it's at 0. It's almost peaking in my recording here, but it's just below 0. So we're good. I still have some headroom to play around with that. So there's a few different windows within this waveform view. So when I say waveform view, I want you to remember this is a destructive editing window, meaning changes I make here affect the project throughout. If I'm editing in a multi-track view, it will affect that. And you'll even get a warning saying, hey, changes were made in the waveform view. So you'll get a notification indicating something's changed. So under the waveform view at the top bar here, you have a spectral view. And this will show you the energy behind a recording. So how the other one was just a visual waveform, this is almost looks like a heat map if you ever seen the movie Predators. It shows you the loudest part of a recording is actually brighter, and the quietest part are darker in tone. So if there's no sound, it actually shows up as black. There's no sound in this area. So keep that in mind. So with this view, some of the other tools are enabled now. These are all selection tools. You have a time selection tool, which allows me to select the whole chunk within that whole spectrum. On the right now, you can see different frequencies that are being affected in this, that are in this recording. You have a marquee selection tool, so this will allow me to select a certain chunk of it. So if I hit play, you'll actually hear just the frequencies. Instead of the whole thing, you're just hearing this small selection. You have a lasso tools, essentially the same thing, but gives you more ability to fine tune your selection. You have a paintbrush tool, which is almost the same thing as well. It allows you to kind of fine tune what your selection is. So if I hit play, It's only going to play those parts I have selected. Oops, let me redo that. And lastly, just like in Photoshop, you have this spot healing tool. So if there's troublesome areas, so say there's a pop or a click, I can either delete that, or if it's a troublesome noise, let's say for instance I recorded outside and there's a fire truck that drove by, you'll hear the sirens blaring. Those all land within a specific frequency, so I can actually select just those sounds. And what Adobe Audition is going to do is it's going to take information from the surrounding audio and try to fill in that blank. So right next to the spectral view is this pitch display. So this will show you which key something is in. So just like I said for that example, if a fire truck drove by, I can see, for instance, what key it's in. I can make my selection and address it that way. So I'll go back into my regular waveform view. So those are the tools at the very top available in this window. You have an option to zoom in horizontally using this bar up top, or there's also these magnifying glasses where you can zoom in horizontally or vertically on the bottom here. You can also reset everything either by pressing this button here or this one at the very top, and that will reset all the vertices to its default settings so you can see everything within your recording. You have your play button, stop button, rewind, fast forward, and your record button. This button here will enable it to loop play. So it's going to keep playing it over and over. And if I toggle that off, it'll just play once. If this was a podcast, in addition to that, there's this button up here that you might use pretty often when editing a podcast. So without that toggled on, if I'm recording, hello, welcome to this introduction, or given a recording, and let's say a client paid me to edit their podcast, and they were nice enough to leave little markers indicating where some troublesome areas are, I can actually use those markers to get a fine selection. So without that enabled, without this tool enabled, it's kind of hard to pinpoint where it is, but if I toggle that on, I can actually click and it will lock in between those markers and I can delete something specific. So in Adobe Audition, there's something I don't know if you saw happen when I deleted this. There's two things actually. One, when I deleted it, everything to the right shifted over to the left. Secondly, the duration of the recording got smaller. So I'm gonna undo it, look at these numbers over here, and then I'll redo it. See, it got shorter. So this kind of helps you keep track of the time that you're actually editing. I wish there was a before and after so you can see the original duration and the current one, but that's not super important. On the bottom here, you can actually see where the cursor is located. So if you know there's a specific area you want to pinpoint, it kind of helps keep track of that stuff.